It's Dr. Seth Naeve. He's our extension soybean agronomist at the University of Minnesota. His office is in St. Paul, but he has done research throughout the state, similar to Dr. Melvick. He's a professor also in a department on the University of Minnesota campus. His topic today is a little bit different, and I'm really excited to hear it. FM reduction in soybeans, and he calls it a twofer. Managing herbicide-resistant weeds while also protecting exports. And so, Dr. Naeve, if you're available, please share your screen and your presentation with our crowd. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Fantastic. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm happy to be here. It's a nice, large crowd for us today, and so I'm excited to talk about, as Angie mentioned, something very, very different. And the topic's going to be, or the presentation is going to actually be quite a bit different as well. This is a really broad topic. I'm going to really hit the very highest points of this and give you some information about how to get a little bit more detail in it. And then after that, we can discuss some of the really finer details, maybe at another point. I just really wanted to hit the very highest points of this. And I think this brings up a lot of really large philosophical questions about farming and sale of your product and how to manage your crop on your fields. Sorry, I'm in this wrong screen. So the first thing I think is important to remember is that we sell, and this is one of the bigger points I think I want to carry on through this whole presentation this morning, is really the question about how we sell our crops. So our crops, we grow them on the farm, we take them to the elevator, they're evaluated based on some sort of set of characteristics beyond just the total number of tons that we're selling or bushels. So there's some sort of a grading system that's been established. And these things, there's a couple of important points about grading systems. One is they were established long, long ago. Even the soybean one that's relatively new was started in 1940 and updated in 2007. But the other key to this is that these grading standards are built around point of sale trades that could continue all the way through the value chain, all the way to the end user. The issue is that this has to be a readily, easily measurable quality trade. So we do things like moisture. We do things like, not so much in soybean anymore, but we could do test weight. We could do foreign material. There's an opportunity to look for color and off-color seeds and things like this. So basically very visual or very simple kind of tests that we can manage at the beginning that gives some indication about the value of that crop to the end user. And that's the other really key part that I need to keep stressing here this morning, is that as farmers, we need to produce a crop that somebody wants to use in the end. Our job is to produce a high value product that somebody wants to buy at the back end. The reality is we get paid by the elevator, but ultimately the value of that product that we produce is determined by whoever is buying this at the far end of the whole system. So that's the poultry producer in Iowa or North Carolina or in Malaysia, Indonesia. So it's important for us to identify what's really important and then be able to produce the quality of crop that best suits that end user. So this really speaks to a lot of what I do in my job. I spend about half my time working on soybean quality issues. And in fact, last night at 10 o'clock, I gave a talk in Southeast Asia to buyers over there about the quality of the US crop this current year. I didn't talk about foreign material, but I talked about protein and oil and amino acids and fatty acids and sugars and energy, and how to purchase the best quality soybeans that they need for their end use. And so it's really important for us to produce that crop, to get it to that end user, because that value that they assign at the end is going to ultimately, it will trace through back to us. This idea that we produce, we feed the world is really a little bit antiquated. The reality is the South Americans are going to produce every soybean that we don't produce here. And so we need to produce a crop that's competitive, that can get into those, that gets on the radar screen of those buyers, whether that's domestic or international, and that they search out for our soybeans and actually buy them as a first choice, rather than the lowest cost producer for them. So I guess back to the slide here, is I would argue that these quality measures that we have for grain grading standards are actually quite antiquated. They are only surviving because they're easy, and then they can push them all the way through the system, and because it's business baggage. I mean, this is the way we've done business, so we're going to continue to grade soybeans, corn, wheat, barley on these same sort of grading standards. So the specific point of this talk is about soybean exports to China. And I know this picture's changed a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. You know, we had tremendous exports, went to basically zero. And now the Chinese are buying up every soybean in the world that can be produced. And that's why we're seeing the prices that we're seeing right now. But the key here again is that we need, irrespective of supply and demand, we need to produce the highest quality crop that's demanded by someone at the other end. And the Chinese, beginning in 2018, really had been working with USDA APHIS to develop a new maximum level of foreign material in soybeans. Soybeans imported into China continually increased in foreign material, and they were seeing a lot of foreign material in those. Whether it's a trade issue or not, there was a lot of concern in China about weed resistance issues, herbicide resistance in weeds within China. And a lot of this is caused by our own popular press. That we've been talking about these really what some outside of our community would call super weeds. So these weeds that basically have multiple herbicide resistance traits and that are difficult for us to manage. It's quite likely that a lot of these same biotypes are present in China already, but there's an interest to reduce foreign material imports into China and at the same time reduce the chances of bringing these herbicide resistance into China. So basically China worked with the USDA and mandated a 1% foreign material maximum. And then within that, if any vessels came into China that had more than 1%, they were able to go into those holds and look and see if they had weed seed in those, and then they could reject those vessels. The problem is that, yes, I know that as a farmer, the seed is already gone, the grain's gone, it's sold, it's down the river, out the rail, over the ocean. But the reality is when those ships get rejected, those whole Panamax vessels have to find somewhere else. They get sold at a huge discount. Ultimately, the exporters are going to pass that discount back to farmers. It may take a while. It may be a regional effect, or it may be broad, but that will get back to the producers. So we want to try to avoid this if we can. So stepping back a couple steps, when this came up in my first trip to China, doing some of this work back in 2005. A Chinese official approached me with a couple of pictures that they had pulled. You can see from the color of the soybeans in this hold that this is actually a Brazilian shipment, but they found treated soybeans in this ship. You know, I don't know how hard they had to look for those, but they found treated seed within the ship, and then the Chinese decided to reject this shipment. And again, there's a lot of trade and a lot of business and exchange issues related to how soybeans are priced in China and whether they want to reject a ship based on the pricing of that purchase versus the spot price. So, you know, there's an opportunity. This gave them an opportunity at the very least to reject the shipment, and this shipment had to go off somewhere else at a big discount. This is a huge no-no. But this is another issue that it's related to growing a crop that we want to produce, we're proud to produce, and that somebody wants to buy. We just cannot be disposing of treated seed at the elevator, hiding stuff, whether that's corn or whether it's treated seed in the corner of a truck, is just a certain no-no. And it could eventually, now with traceability and things, there's a potential for millions and millions of dollars of lawsuits to come back if any of these things get traced back to individual elevators or individual farmers. Okay, back to FM. You can definitely find FM when you're on the ground in Asia. So this was a picture that one of my friends provided. This was actually a trade group from Iowa from a little bit more than a year ago, so just before COVID. These folks were over in Southeast Asia at a dumping facility where they were bringing in soybeans. There's actually soybeans from the U.S. and from Brazil in these two pictures, and so I challenge you to try to identify which one is which. This one, actually, you can see the color a little bit better. So the one on the left is the lighter colored soybeans. These are U.S. soybeans. These came out of the Gulf. The ones on the right are from Brazil. You can see the difference in FM because those were allowed. Those were number 2 soybeans being exported into this country. Those number 2 soybeans were from the US, pretty ugly looking soybeans. Cockleburrs and corn are pretty easy to find in these. So when we've got farmers and when I've been over, you can actually find these just by looking at those soybeans that are coming out of these vessels. So it's nothing like what's on the farm. Here's a little view of what we see at the farm level. So I do a survey of the US crop every year. This is the 2020 survey that we did. Each of these points represents at least one sample from that individual zip code. This is foreign material level in those soybean samples. You can see that these colors represent 0.0 something percent. These are all very, very, very low foreign material in our soybeans that we harvest all over the US. Typically, we get a little bit more from the southern US. Typically, we'll see some little points pop up where we have some really difficult harvest conditions, but for the most part, FM is very, very low. We're doing our weed seed analysis for our 2020 crop right now. Here's the 2019 analysis. I'm going to give you just kind of a snapshot of what we see in our soybeans. So in 2019, we collected about 1,600 samples. Of those samples harvested or collected from the farm, they had an average of 0.2% foreign material. So 1/5 of 1 percentage point. So only 20% of the maximum for a number 1 soybean at the farm level, and that's on average. Only 7 samples out of 1,600 had FM levels above 2%. So really, 99% of these samples had FM below 1, so exceptionally low FM at the farm level. The problem, though, is that when we start looking at that FM, 25% of those samples contain weed seed. And so why is this important? Well, it's important because as farmers, if this weed seed is ending up in your soybeans, that means it's going through your combine, it's being spread around your field, within fields and between fields. And this is going to cause us greater problems downstream. And this is really the two-for piece of this, is that we build an educational package around managing weeds, herbicide resistance weeds in fields, with the idea that this is important for farmers to do to maintain clean fields and reduce the weed seed bank in their own fields to help them survive as we go down the line and having increased levels of weeds and increased herbicide resistance in these weeds. So this is what we see in these samples. So this gives you kind of a flavor numerically of what we're seeing. So we found 94, basically 100 samples came in with some sort of pigweed samples. We analyze these visually, so we don't know which species of pigweeds these are, but they're amaranth species. So that's about 6% of all the samples had pigweed in those. Morning glory, nearly the same. Corn. So incidentally, corn gets to be one of the biggest complicating factors as we get further down the chain, because we can have continual contamination with that corn. A big problem with corn and exports is that these corn traits are not necessarily regulated or given import certification into a lot of countries. So it's possible as well, aside from the weed seed issue in China, it's possible for shipments of whole soybeans into other nations to be rejected based on genetic traits found in the corn that's not allowed for that particular country. So again, probably from a practical standpoint, not a huge deal, but corn can be hugely problematic because of the genetic traits that it carries from a business standpoint as these traits occur. So you can see we've got lots and lots of species present in our soybean crops that we harvest from around the US. This is a partial list of the species that we've received in these samples or that we identified. So just a quick summary of this 1% threshold. So what it is and how I think it affects us. I do think that in the end, it's going to allow parity with Brazilian exports into China. So it's actually good for us. We were really discriminated against in China, in the Chinese market, because of this 2% allowance where the Brazilians were basically providing 1% or less FM in all their grain shipments for the last 5 or 10 years. So this gives us, at least meets us for parity for that one particular trait. This is a big one from the farmer standpoint, is that I get a lot of pushback on maintaining purity at the farm level if they don't get paid for it. But this really requires the trade downstream to maintain the purity that was provided at the farm gate. So now the exporters are going to have to make sure to have a clean product all the way through, because they do not want to be left holding the bag with too much foreign material in there. Because the exporters are going to have clean soybeans available for the Chinese market, they should be able to provide clean soybean vessels into other markets as well that may not require 2%. So this will actually help us into other export markets as well. So again, farmers are really going to need to do all in their power to reduce weed seed contamination and foreign material into their seed. So storage purposes, pricing purposes for FM, weed seed from a weed management standpoint are important. And then you put this all together with marketing and maintaining the highest quality crop that we can. I think all of this really works together. The USDA also had a small program for this, and ours paralleled this in some respects. So the USDA put together a little bit of an educational package that was a little bit more comprehensive, from weed control through harvesting, handling, sampling, inspection, analysis, and trade support for this whole issue. So they called it a systems approach to work all the way through it. What we're doing at the University of Minnesota under a project that's been supported by North Dakota Soybean and South Dakota Soybean and Minnesota Soybean is around, basically the first blue box there is around weed control, a little bit about harvesting, and then handling. And so that's really what I'm doing here today, is promoting this educational package that we put together that goes a couple steps beyond what I've talked about here today. So what we have is we've created a set of 6 videos that are available on my website at University of Minnesota Extension. So there's soybeans, UMN.edu. So soybeans.umn.edu. If you look under seed quality and foreign material, you can find all these videos, and they walk you through planning for managing weed management in the winter, pre-plant, weed control, post, we talk about harvest management and storage. We do a number of different things and talk about in slightly more detail than we've talked about here, I think in a pretty easy to digest educational format. So I've got a few minutes. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to attempt to show a video. This is an overview video of all those 6 or 8 videos that we put together on this. With bandwidth issues, you may not all be able to receive this, and it may not be a real clean video for you. Just hang on, it's only 4 minutes. Grab a cup of coffee, come back, and we'll have a discussion in a few minutes. If any of the if the moderators would let me know if I have any problems playing this, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and hopefully we have our fingers crossed that things will work out okay.
Soybeans are an important cash crop to farmers in the Dakotas and Minnesota. Soybean acreage has continued to grow in the region to meet both domestic and export demand. Because of the region's proximity to infrastructure that can rapidly deliver soybeans to important markets like Asia, a high percentage of soybeans from North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota are exported each year. Customers around the world demand quality products. That includes soybeans with minimal foreign material. Sanitary and phytosanitary concerns are prompting global buyers to focus on the amount and types of foreign material in soybeans they purchase. Weed seeds are of particular concern for buyers as they work to curtail the spread of noxious weeds. There are many important steps along the export chain that ensure the spread along the export chain that ensures quality, including sampling and grading at local elevators and shipping ports. Those are all important steps in ensuring quality, but the process begins on the farm.
Farmers really have to make sure that they're limiting foreign material that goes to the elevator. We know that soybeans don't get cleaner as they go through the system, and therefore the cleaner those soybeans are when they leave the farm, the better they are for our international markets.
Key to reducing weed seeds in harvested soybeans is season-long weed management. That begins with understanding the weed species and level of infestation present in a field. That requires scouting and management plans. Knowing what weeds are present helps farmers and their advisors to develop management strategies to control troublesome weeds.
Farmers really need to do all they can all the way through their system, from planning their herbicide programs and their weed management programs, execution of those, removing weed seeds at the end of the season before we lose seed in the field, and certainly before those go through the combine at harvest. And even if they do, we need to make sure we have a clean and we set our combines appropriately so we clean out those weed seeds on the farm. So there's a lot we can do that benefits the farmer themselves, reduces weed seed into the weed seed bank, but then there's the added benefit that we get a better position in the international market.
It's vital that fields start clean and stay clean, and that farmers rotate the modes of action in the herbicides they apply to maintain the product's effectiveness and reduce the likelihood that weeds will develop resistance. Agronomic practices can also help with weed management. Scouting remains an important part of season-long management to understand what weeds are present to determine the next steps. Not all control practices are chemical. Manual techniques such as rotary hoeing, cultivating, or even manual weed removal could be necessary and helpful in keeping weeds from producing seeds. Weed management doesn't end at harvest. Farmers can reduce the amount of foreign material in their harvested soybeans by properly setting all combine fans and sieves. Proper settings will keep pods, stems, chaff, and weed seeds from getting into the hopper without sending valuable soybeans out the back. In addition to weed management, growers should regularly clean storage bins, augers, grain legs, and farm equipment to prevent the spread of weeds and cross-contamination. With so much riding on soybean exports, it's imperative that farmers do their part to ensure buyers look to us for clean, quality soybeans.
We're committed to delivering nice, quality, clean beans any time of the year that you want them.
Yeah, like any business that you're in, if you deliver something your customer wants, it increases demand. So we do make a lot of effort to make sure that we can deliver a product that is usable by our customers overseas and domestically also.
Okay, sorry about the little glitch there. I am going to stop my screen, and I think that we should have some time for questions. Is that right, Angie?
That's right. And there's several. One of either Melissa or Erica is going to ask questions of you.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Seth. And yeah, and we got the whole video to play. So that's the important thing. Hopefully most folks were able to watch it over their internet connections. First couple of questions, maybe regarding maybe some more of the basics or mechanics of exports arriving in other countries. Maybe could you explain kind of what other countries, foreign requirements? I guess the question would, do other countries like Brazil, Argentina, or other exporters have the same foreign material requirements that the US does? And when the ships arrive at their destination and they get rejected because of foreign material, or in China for say, do they reject the whole load and send it elsewhere, or do the Chinese simply demand a discount in order to accept it?
Yeah, I'll take the last part first. So yeah, it's just as you would probably expect, is it's a negotiation, right? So you've got a vessel that's due to another location in a number of days, and so those exporters, whether they own that vessel or whether they're leasing it or someone else is hauling that grain for them, they need to turn that ship. And so every day can be hundreds of thousands of dollars for them. So they either make a deal or they move that ship on to someone else. And so someone else is willing to buy that at a discount so they can roll it around to another big port. But obviously it puts that exporter in a big bind if they have to do that. And there's a lot of nuances to this and how grain is bought and sold and how different countries use either the spot market or futures to purchase their soybeans. It has an impact on all those things. But the key ultimately is that, if you have a product that is everybody wants, it's harder to reject that, and it provides, it's going to carry a larger value all the way back to the producer. And I think the first part of the question was related to, these requirements. And I don't know exactly all the history on it, but my guess is that the Chinese required a 1% max FM level on Brazilian soybeans because they got burned on some bad high FM soybeans historically. And it was probably at a time when they weren't as reliant on Brazil as they are today. So they just created a mandate for 1%, and the Brazilians learned how to maintain their soybeans and keep those soybeans clean to meet that maximum FM level. So I don't think it's anything really that much different than what we've got today. And whether there's a mandate, whether there's a rule, whether there's a grading standard or not, in the end, it goes back to this larger philosophical issue is that you need to have a product that somebody wants to buy in the end. And if it doesn't have those traits, then that purchaser is going to be looking somewhere else to purchase it.
Gotcha. So are most soybeans shipped whole, or do we ship soybean meal as well?
Absolutely. We ship a lot of soybean meal, goes overseas, but soybeans are by far the largest, the fraction of how we export soybeans. Most of them go whole, but there's a large number of countries, especially in Southeast Asia, that don't have processing facilities themselves. So they're buying soybean meal from us and China. So a lot going on there. I mean, the Chinese are processing U.S. soybeans and selling into Southeast Asia as well. But so yes, so the question is, how does this really relate to meal sales? And I would say that our domestic buyers, our domestic processors, they want clean soybeans as well. They're fortunate, though, is that they're located very close to the farmers. And so for the most part, our U.S. processors are buying either directly from producers or one step from those producers. And so they're able to actually have relatively clean soybeans going into those plants as well. And that the cleaner the soybeans into a processing plant, the better it is. They're able to produce a higher quality meal because that foreign material will obviously be low in protein and it'll have other ingredients that necessarily basically dilute out the quality of that soybean meal. So It's just cleaner soybeans are better for everybody along the system.
So along those lines, a couple of questions just regarding about improving cleaning along the supply chain. So will there be greater use of seed cleaning and conditioning equipment along the supply chain? And will port facilities work to improve their cleaning facilities?
That's a fantastic question. And I don't, I guess from my limited knowledge of the crop and how it moves through, I would say that that's a possibility. But more likely, there's going to be less blending in of dirty, ugly soybeans along the way. So basically, sellers along the way, if there's a 1% maximum or a 2% maximum, most of those suppliers are going to just blend up to that level. And that's the unfortunate fact of how these categorization of these standards go, is that there's no benefit of having 0.5 relative to 0.9% foreign material. And so there's going to be blending going on. And so I think back to the question is that those exporters are going to definitely do less of that. So the farmer says, well, who cares if they're just dumping crap on top of these ships anyway? Well, the key is we need if everybody would produce a cleaner quality crop, there would just be less of those dirty soybeans available. The other side of it too is that if there probably will be greater discounts applied to soybeans sold at foreign material that's closer above 1 to 2, because and then beyond 2, of course, because those everybody along the supply chain is going to have a harder time getting rid of those dirty soybeans. So the first impact is probably going to be on those farmers that are trying to deliver soybeans that are worse than number 2 soybeans that have more foreign material than 2%.
Okay, so will those farmers, will they be rejected at the elevator, or will elevators be required to start rejecting dirty loads coming to the farms?
Well, that's up to them and where they have a place for it and whether they can hide it. That's the other challenge, is that, for farmers, is because I'm asking everybody to work altruistically for the good of everyone. And if everybody can deliver very, very clean soybeans, to be devil's advocate in this is that allows an opportunity to blend down some other grain in it. And so it's a difficult challenge, I think, for farmers. I think we have to act altruistically and work for everyone, but also, encourage those exporters at the USB, USDA, American Soybean Association level, to encourage them to continue to provide, export as high a quality soybeans as they can. But I think to your question is, that's totally up to the elevator, whether they have room to where to put that. And so it's the same thing we've dealt with as farmers with protein and small grains. It's the same issue we've got with moisture levels. It kind of depends on what's happening in the area. And if proteins are very high or very low, or if there's wet or dry soybeans or other grains, it allows for blending on either side of it. And so those far departures from the normal are going to be the ones that have received the big discounts or are rejected.
Gotcha. Kind of a little two-part and switch topics a little bit. Could you just clarify if 1% foreign material, is that 1% by weight? And what is the requirements for organic soybeans? Do they have a higher foreign material threshold?
Yeah, so it is 1% by weight. So it does, that foreign material tends to be pretty light. So 1% can look like a lot in there. And then to the second question is related to organics. Those kind of organics would fit under an identity preserve type of a marketplace that has lots and lots of additional requirements well beyond these grading standards. So we typically don't even talk about grading standards when we talk about organic soybeans, because those are going to have really stringent requirements and foreign material down near zero in some cases on these contracts. And so they want to ensure that there aren't even splits. They want to not only ensure that they're organic, but maybe a certain variety, certain seed size, protein level minimum. So many requirements beyond FM itself. And so the FM and the splits question will actually occur at that exporter. So a farmer growing organic soybeans and selling into that market, they're going to be working with an exporter, and that exporter can lay out the maximums for splits and damage and off-color soybeans and foreign material that they deliver, or they can just discount them because they're going to have to sell those as non-organic soybeans or as other products.
Okay, we have one more quick question before we go to the break, and then will you be available to answer any other questions?
Yes, I'll hang around for break for sure.
Okay, awesome. Quick, one last question. Are soybeans discounted for weed seeds even if it's below the foreign material threshold?
They are not, and actually all the way through the system, I would say that they would not be. The only place this comes into play is that 1% is a trigger for Chinese officials to actually look for the weed seed within these shipments when they're above 1%. So 1% provides them gives them an out for looking more deeply, and then they can find weed seeds, and then they could reject the shipment if they find weed seeds. The reality is we know that if we're above 1%, they're going to look and they're going to find weed seed if that's their intent. So the idea is really two-part for farmers, is to reduce foreign material, one, and reduce weed seed. And these are there is an interaction between these two things. But the reality is that these are both singular focuses that farmers probably need to work on for different reasons.